Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Goud Crowd Internet Radio Show. I am your host, Goud. You can listen here on X, my handle, so that's at Goud for Utah. You can also listen at the Utah Mainstream Media YouTube channel, and then you can also listen at KMMU.org. So today, well, let me start. I guess one of my fellow radio hosts said I should plug my own business. Just so you guys know, I do have my own law practice. I think some of you guys already know the history that I used to work at a company and then they let me go for political reasons. And so I started my own law practice. It's called the Maragani Law Group. I've been practicing law now for more than 20 years, and I provide outside general counsel services for companies. And then I also represent people in litigation. So if you have legal needs and you want someone who actually shares your values, representing you in your legal disputes, you should give me a call. It's 385-237-7960. Or you can DM me on social media. So just you can see my phone number is in my name and is at the bottom of the screen. And you know what that means? I don't have a producer this week. So, but I can still take phone calls. You just have to call my personal cell phone, and then I'll put you up to the little speaker I use for the show, and you can participate. But please do call in. I love the phone calls. It makes it more interesting for me, and I think also for you guys, because you get to hear different perspectives. We have a little jam-packed show today. I've got a lot of different things to talk about that I think you'll find interesting. Just to start, though, there will not be a weekly rundown this week. There's a lot of topics, but I just didn't have the time to put it together. I'm a little stretched thin for this week. I had drill. I'm in the National Guard, so I drilled this weekend. And then I've got a lot of deadlines this week, so I just don't have the time to actually draft it out and then record it. And as you guys know, the guy who is the cameraman's out of town right now. So, but we'll be back next week. I will pledge to you that. There's tons and tons of material out there. It's just really, it does take time to be able to kind of pick 5 stories and then whittle it down to, less of a minute or less per story so that people will actually listen. So we'll be back next week. Now, another kind of update I wanted to give you guys is I had posted about how I filed a grandma request to the Utah Driver's License Division, asking for the number of driver's privileges cards that they issued between 2020 and 2024. They came back, said they did not have a spreadsheet or anything where they tracked that, but they said they could create one, but I would have to pay for it. And I had asked for a fee waiver, but they denied the fee waiver. Some people on social media told me to ask and find out how much it would cost. And they came back and said it would be $35, which is crazy to me because it almost seems like they spent more time just going back and forth with me than they needed to if they were only going to charge $35. But I heard from a little birdie, because I do have sources here and there, that they actually, this is not the first time I filed a grandma request, and I have a reputation for being tenacious and going on appealing until I get to the State Records Committee. And so some of the agencies don't want to deal with that. Plus, I also heard that they saw the post and the number of views it garnered, plus people's responses to it. And that had an impact. So $35 is really just to save face. I will say that if people want to donate to help pay for the $35 fee, that would be fantastic. You can do that on my Venmo. If I get more than $35, I'll refund anything above that. I'm not looking to collect money off this, but it would be helpful to have other people help in terms of paying these fees so we can get the information. I think at $35 for the actual request, it's not really worth appealing it, because I'd be spending, a couple hours drafting an appeal that I could instead spend working on other things. So, if you disagree with that, I'd love to hear it. So feel free, please share your thoughts if you think I'm wrong and I should still appeal it. But I think at $35, it's really, from a dollar perspective, it's just not worth it to go through the appeals process. It won't. I don't know that it'll make any sort of point. This one's kind of random. As I've said before, I live in Riverton. I'm just south of Daybreak, and I have noticed over the past couple of weeks that we're getting a lot more airplane noise down here. And let me just add, it's actually pretty normal to have Black Hawks and Apaches flying over. That I'm not talking about that. That doesn't bother me. But there have been passenger planes that I've been noticing that have been flying, I guess, over the Okur Mountains. So they're coming from the west and going east, and then they turn north towards Salt Lake City Airport. And I don't know if I just haven't noticed it before or if the flight pattern has changed. And I'm just going to put this out there. I don't know if anybody knows how to figure that out. I do not know how to figure that out. I was trying to look it up yesterday, and I couldn't really figure out exactly how to do this. So if you have thoughts on it, I would love to hear it. Please share it. And that would be helpful, because I would like to figure out if those flight patterns have changed, because I'm wondering if they've done what they're supposed to do when they're going to change the flight patterns. And I don't know if there's like a public comment that would happen, or if they would have to talk to some of the localities, because it's actually like pretty loud. And I'm very noise sensitive. That's one of the reasons why I live here, because when I was shopping for a house, there was a time, a lot of Utah home, we have a lot of these kind of big roads, like 114th, I would even say 118th, 123rd, all these like really big roads that cause a lot of road noise. And I was just shocked at how much noise I was hearing as I was going around. And it got to the point where I'd be with my real estate agent, we'd walk up to the front door, and if he could hear the road noise, he would be like, "Do you even want to see this house? I can already hear the road noise. I know you're going to say something." And I was like, "Nope." And we would just stop. So I'm super sensitive about that. I don't like living around noise. And so the airplane thing is just really, getting on my nerves. Hey, if you know anything about that, let me know. Now I just there is an event coming up that I wanted to share with people. It is the Salt Lake County Republican Women's Club is having I think it's an annual meeting on Thursday, December 12th. So in 3 days. And they will be holding elections at this meeting. It'll be from 12 to 1:30 at the Red Robin in Murray. Right now, it's run by Lori Stringham. She's the Salt Lake County Council member. For those of you who don't know, she has 2 trans kids, and she's for a Republican, she's pretty liberal on most issues. In fact, I'm not sure that I would consider her really a Republican when it comes to policy, but whatever, she holds herself out as one, that's fine. Now, but that group has a lot of potential. If you go down to Washington County, they have a Washington County Republican Women's Group, and it's really a powerful group. They hold monthly meetings, and they get like 100 people that show up for lunches during the day, and they have big speakers show up. It's very cool to see, and it would be great if we could get something similar like that down in Salt Lake County. And so with these leadership elections, my understanding is that Carolyn Phippen is going to run to become the next chair. So I would encourage women to show up for the meeting and to help get new leadership in there. I was originally told that if you're a man that you could also join and vote, but it turns out that if you're a man, you can join. It's like $5 for the membership fee, but you cannot vote for their leadership elections unless you identify as a woman. Apparently Lori Stringham has some sort of a special rule that if you're trans and you decide that you want to go and be part of this women's club, that they will actually treat you like a woman and let you vote. And I assume they'll let you into their women's bathroom because Utah's laws allow that. And so I would just say to all of you, if that's your thing, if you want to be if you want to go identify, I guess if you're a man, like maybe I could do this. You could just go and identify as a woman and vote. Maybe I will do that. I typically, I don't usually shave every day, but I had drill this weekend. That's why I'm a little bit more clean shaven than usual. But I guess maybe I could shave that morning and then go to the meeting and say I identify as a woman, and that's why I shaved. And then maybe they'll let me vote, and I could help get someone like Carolyn elected. And it would be, and the point though is that it would be great to have this run by someone who's conservative, because I think someone like Carolyn could really reinvigorate that group and make it a good group for messaging, for having people come and speak, like our elected officials and various Republicans, and to be a platform for conservative values. So again, that meeting is going to will be on Thursday from 12 to 1:30 at the Red Robin in Murray. So that's just my little plug for that. Now, I wasn't going to talk about this first, but it's fresh on my mind. So let me pull up this slideshow for you guys. So today, for lawyers, you have to do what's called continuing legal education. And in Utah, you're required to do something like, 15 hours a year or something like that. And so I went to a CLE today, and I thought we could talk about this because this to me is just wild. As I think some of you guys know, in Utah, there is a law. Well, let me back up a little bit. So at some point, I think in 2020, maybe, the Utah Supreme Court issued a decision allowing people to change their sex on their birth certificates. And when I say allowing people, I mean allowing people with gender dysphoria to change their sex on their birth certificates, right? And so the Utah legislature in 2023 came in and they put some limits on it in SB 93, because I think the way the decision was written, it didn't have kind of some clear limits. And so Dan McKay proposed a bill to actually create some left and right limits. But what you're going to see now is that there's some clear problems with this bill. So first of all, this is and I'll show you some of the slides as I talk through this, and I've talked about this before, either here or maybe it's on Twitter or X, sorry. In the law that the legislature passed, they said you have to be at least age 15 and a half to file to change your sex. But it can only become effective once you turn 16. And so I'm just going to ask the question, why is a conservative legislature allowing people to change their sex on their birth certificate at 16? These are minors, right? And our actual goal with the minors should be to bring them to make them feel comfortable in their birth sex. I would never ever want us to have a situation where a kid is trying to change their sex. I think our goal should always be to get these people back to being comfortable in their birth sex. So I find this to be problematic, and I think we need to go back really and amend this law to make this at least. I wouldn't even allow this, but if you're going to allow it, you should at least have to be 18, right? I mean, I feel like that's a pretty standard. Now on the next page, I think I have here. Oh no, okay, hold on. Oh, okay, sorry, let's go back here. Now this is off. Okay. This is okay, by the way, I apologize. Some of the writing on here is pink. I had an impossible time reading this at the presentation, but I think he did this because there's a Salt Lake City council member is actually a lawyer who's very big into doing these sex changes for transgender people. And so he did this in the colors of the trans flag. So you can see it's blue, light blue, and light pink. That's their thing. Hard to read though. Now, what I thought was interesting here is that this lays out the standards that the court is supposed to use to determine if you can change your sex on your birth certificate. According to that Chris Wharton, he's the city council member, you do not actually have to get sex reassignment surgery to change your sex on your birth certificate. Okay, I can't make this up. You literally don't have to get. So if you're a man changing into a woman, you can still have your male equipment and change your sex on your birth certificate. That makes no sense to me at all. No sense. I don't understand why why the legislature came in, passed a law about this, and didn't require you to have sex reassignment surgery. Very strange in a Republican state. And it also just doesn't make any sense, right? Again, I don't think you should even allow these sex changes on your birth certificates. But if you're going to allow them, I think you should force the people to go through the full sex reassignment surgery. So for a man to a woman, you should have to, snip, get rid of all the male parts and actually be like some version of a female, and vice versa. And if you don't do that, you shouldn't be allowed to change the sex on your birth certificate. It's pretty simple. But that's, it's Utah, so I guess we don't do that. Now, if you go, let's go down here. Oh, okay. Okay. This was crazy to me. Oh, back one more thing on that. We're one of the few states that does not require you to get sex reassignment surgeries to change your sex on your birth certificate. I thought that was wild. Again, this I think is a reflection of Utah's culture, where people spend an inordinate amount of time thinking that it's being nice to somebody to appease their mental health problems. And I think that's why we also have it is my belief that the percentage of people who have gender dysphoria is higher in Utah than probably in any other state in the nation. I think it is a cultural issue of people not understanding that the way to handle that is to be honest with the person suffering from it and help them not have gender dysphoria. We tend to instead indulge it. So what I thought was also kind of interesting is that Utah actually allows people who are non-binary. Again, I have no idea I don't even know how you would prove you're non-binary. It doesn't make any sense. They can put an X for their sex on their Utah birth certificate and Utah driver's licenses and US passports. Now, I think the passport one will be gone when Trump takes office, right? Thankfully. But the Utah birth certificate and Utah driver's license will still be an issue. Why do you think that the Utah legislature, and by the way, Dan McKay proposed this bill, allowed a non-binary people to put an X as their sex on their driver's license and birth certificate? That is mind-blowing to me. And Dan McKay is touted as this super conservative legislator, and this is what he came up with. And I don't understand it. Now, the final one that I thought was interesting is this one. Okay. And I want to point you to, if you're going to hear my dogs barking, I apologize. They're actually outside, but apparently they didn't get the message that they need to be quiet. This is the one I thought. So once you get a court order saying that you can change your sex on your vital records, you then take that to the Office of Vital Records, which is in the Department of Health and Human Services, which is run by left-wing lunatic Tracy Gruber. I've talked about this before, but I'll just, for those of you who haven't heard it, she is a left-wing lawyer from Chicago that Governor Cox imported to Salt Lake City, or to Utah. Of course, someone calls me now. And well, actually, I don't know if she's calling to comment. Text me if you are, Marissa. But what I was gonna say is that so anyway, she's a left-wing lunatic. She's doing a horrible job running the Department of Health and Human Services, because underneath it is the Division of Child and Family Services, or DCFS, which had that Gavin Peterson, who died earlier this year of horrible abuse. I mean, his family starved him to death over a months or years long period. And despite multiple complaints filed with DCFS by the Weber County School District, DCFS did not take care of it and handle it correctly. The kid dies, and there's literally no accountability at all. With Tracy Gruber is still there. People are, for some reason, they're giving, they invite her to events. I would not want that person anywhere near me. And if I was Governor Cox, I'd fire her because she's not doing a good job. Like, she's already, and there's been articles saying that I don't think that that's the only issue that's happened in DCFS. She's just not doing a good job. She's not a good lawyer or not a talented administrator. And in a state of 3.2 million people, we ought to have somebody who can do a better job than that. But for some reason that I don't understand, Governor Cox has held on to her. Now, and also she makes $333,000 a year in that position, which it's just to me outrageous. We shouldn't be paying anybody in the government that much money unless there's a special reason to do it, like you're a doctor. But if you're a lawyer, that's way too much money to work for the government. Nobody should make that kind of money. If you want to make $333,000 a year, you should go and work in the private sector. But government pay for lawyers should really cap out at $200,000 at the most, and really in Utah it should cap out at the governor's salary, which I think is $180,000, because that's all you need. Again, if you're supposed to be doing public service, not getting rich off the government and the taxpayer. But to get back to what we're talking about here, her office issues the amended birth certificates. Under Utah law, they issue, after the transgender person goes and gets this sex change through the court, and the court issues an order, they take that order to the Office of Vital Records, and then the Office of Vital Records issues an amended birth certificate. The amended birth certificate does not indicate on it that it is amended. And Mr. Wharton, or Councilmember Wharton, specifically said if they do try to say that it's amended on it, you need to tell them it is not supposed to show that it is amended. So just imagine that. They're issuing a new birth certificate to you where no one's going to be able to tell that you changed your sex on it. And I'll just say this again, it is my view that we shouldn't even be allowing people to change their sex on their birth certificate. But if you are going to allow it, right, it should say that it's been amended so that people can tell that you changed it. And it should say what's been changed. Because otherwise this turns into just a complete fraud on regular everyday people who have to look at these documents that are really just saying something that's not true. So I just thought this was insane that in a state like Utah that's supposed to be this conservative red state, that we're allowing people to change their birth certificates. We allow them to, we don't indicate that it's an amended birth certificate. We allow them to put an X marker on it instead of male or female. This was just very wild to me that we're seeing this in Utah. Now, I want to add that I'm wondering if it's worth going and talking to, hold on, let me stop the sharing. Oh, hold on. All right. If it's worth talking to Speaker Schultz about this, because, to give him credit, I don't agree with everything that he does, but I actually liked that he funded a PAC that sent out all sorts of messaging pointing out how all the Democrats in Utah that are in elected office support the radical trans agenda. I commend him for that. I think that's fantastic. He actually understands the issue a little bit better than some of his colleagues, and I think he wants to run for governor. So maybe this is an opportunity to go and talk to him about these bills that have been passed in the past that did not actually solve the problem. And in this birth certificate case, I think it actually makes the problem worse in some ways, because at least the old rules were a court rule, and now we have a statute, though, that it's allowing the birth certificate changes starting at 16, which is a minor and shouldn't be happening. And then allowing the X designator. That's not a statutory issue. Now, the X designation, just so it's clear, the ability for a non-binary person to put X as their sex, that's not from the statute. That's from court case law. But the statute should have been written to eliminate that option, right? Because there's no such thing as being non-binary. I mean, non-binary is just really another way of saying that you have mental problems, like you have mental health issues, and you need to get this resolved. So, and I think part of the reason that this happens is because a lot of Republican legislators don't reach out to conservative activists who care about these issues and know about them. Yeah, and just to give you, like, I'm actually one of Dan McKay's constituents. I am a conservative gay guy. I think everybody knows that. And so he has my number. He could have called me and asked me about it. So, hey, what do you think about this? What do other gay people that you associate with think about this law? Is it on the right track? And I think what happens, though, is that they go and they talk to left-wing gay groups. And the left-wing gay groups, no matter what he says on a bill like this, they'll be with their hair on fire, going crazy, like, oh, this is anti-trans legislation. It's because mostly what the left-wing gay groups do is that they're grifters, and the trans issue is actually just a big, massive grift. So that was kind of my thinking on this. Is I wish that they would talk more to activists on our own side. And I'm not the only conservative gay guy in Utah. I'm not saying it like that. Like, there's Lady MAGA. You could go talk to him. And there are others, even within the Republican Party, that could help you kind of formulate better policy if you're willing to talk to them. I think some of our Republican legislators, they don't like the grassroots very much. They prefer to go work with left-wing people because it's easier to have that enemy, and then you can be like, look how conservative I am. They hate it, but in reality, the legislation you turn out is actually not that conservative. They just have to be a drama queens. When I say drama, the drama queens, besides Kara Birkeland, the other drama queens are the left-wing gay groups because they're trying to grift. And you can only do that if you get people all thinking that everybody's anti-trans and your life is going to be over and it's so unsafe for you, et cetera, et cetera. So the next piece of this, though, let me give you an example of working with conservative gays. In 2023, I worked with, and at the time I was the chair of the Utah Log Cabin Republicans, right? And this is before we got dissolved by the national group, and I still don't really have a clear sense of why that happened. I think some of it had to do with complaints that were filed by a bunch of legislators in Utah. Because it was kind of interesting, what I learned is that the National Log Cabin Republican group is not really much of a policy-making group that requires you to take kind of clear positions on issues. They're more of an access group. They want access to powerful people because then they think they're going to make policy, but then it turns out they only go for like the easiest issues possible. A couple of years ago, their big issue was, we're going to go and clear out the dishonorable discharges that were given to gays when Don't Ask, Don't Tell was in effect. Well, that's a pretty, it's a pretty easy issue, right? Everybody agrees with that. So if that's the only type of issue you want to take on, you're not going to have a big impact. But as we kind of started going into policymaking in Utah, I think they were getting worked up about it because, we're a Republican majority state. And so most of the people we're talking to are Republicans. Most of the people, because if you are if you're working with the Utah legislature, you don't need Democrat votes to pass anything. And so I think that means that when we attack a legislator, because let's say they're wrong on the issue or we're trying to get them to move towards our side, the different strategies here, that it hurts the National Log Cabin Republicans. They didn't like that because it hurts their ability to get access, which is their main thing. So, but I worked in 2023 with Representative Mike Peterson. He's up from Logan. And it was HB 228. This is actually a really important bill because I think it was 2019, they tried to pass a conversion therapy ban in Utah. It failed in the legislature. And then Governor Cox, who was lieutenant governor at the time, imposed a conversion therapy ban through fiat. He had the Department of Professional Licensing, DOPL, put out a rule, and it banned conversion therapy. But conversion therapy traditionally was, if you're gay, they send you somewhere, and maybe they like make you think about men or something, and then they electrocute you so that you stop thinking about it. Like, that's conversion therapy. But the rule that they had passed was so broad that it actually barred any sort of discussions, so talking to either gays or kids suffering from gender dysphoria about not being those things. Now, as a gay guy myself, I think you could have this. I don't have an issue if someone wants to go and talk about that. Certainly not an adult, especially if you're gay and you want to go, or you're having feelings for men and you want to go and talk to someone about it and see if you can not have those feelings. I don't know why I would care about that. That's really up to you to do. But the bigger damage here from that rule was that therapists felt that they could not talk to a child who identified as a different gender than their birth sex, because it would violate that rule. So if your child came to you and said, let's say your son came to you and said, "Oh, hey, mom, dad, I think I'm a girl. I want to identify as she, her, she, whatever. You get it. I want to use female pronouns. I want to change my name from Goud to Gaudina. And I want to," and then you as a parent, you're like, whoa, let's go talk to a therapist. But the problem was with the rule that Governor Cox had put in place, therapists thought that their licensing would be in jeopardy because they'd be violating the rule against conversion therapy if they were to talk to me, in this case, about the benefits of staying in my birth gender, and that maybe I wasn't actually a girl and this was a mistake. Instead, what they thought the rule required is for them to affirm the child's chosen gender identity. And you can see why that's a problem, right? Again, some of you guys may disagree with me on this, but it is my view that being gay is biological. It's just, however, whether you're born that way, whether it's genetic, whatever it is, it's something that's just there. In the same way that if a guy or a girl is straight, it's just there. Like, I don't think you're trained to do that. But gender identity is not. It's a mental health issue. And you can convince people that they are trans or transgender if you put the effort in. So a lot of what goes on in Utah with pornographic books in schools, books promoting the trans agenda, are all aimed at making your kids, normalizing transgenderism to your kids, and making it more likely that they will become or identify as trans in some form. And there's a couple ways they could do that. They could either identify as the opposite sex or identify as non-binary. Those are both considered trans identities. And then there's a whole ton of other ones. Like, you could be pansexual and demisexual and all of these things. But that's because those are mental health issues. And mental health issues can be overcome, including the trans issue. If you provide children with the right type of therapy, talk therapy, and talk to them about, I think a lot of this, they target the activists that are part of this effort, target children at their most vulnerable, which is kind of that junior high, early high school phase, when kids are awkward. It's a totally normal thing. You're growing up. You're probably like oddly shaped, not in the right proportions, because you're going through growth spurts. If you're a boy, you're probably getting facial, you're getting hair. All this kind of stuff happens that's new to you, and so it makes you feel awkward. I think for some kids that they can target them and then start to groom them into being trans. And so this bill that we in 2023, I worked with Representative Peterson, and we did this bill that would change that rule so that it still banned conversion therapy, right? But it allowed talk therapy, including, and made it very clear that if you're a therapist, you could talk to children who were identifying, who had gender dysphoria, and you could help them become comfortable in their birth sex, which I think is really important. So that's the benefits of working with conservative gays and conservative activists on your own side. You can actually get policy that's better. I will say here with that bill, which is HB 228 in 2023, a left-wing gay group came in and tried to kill it. They weren't able to. And so at the end of the day, what happened is it did get amended a little bit, but we made sure that that the therapists, conservative therapists, were comfortable with it and thought they could go and help kids with gender dysphoria overcome it. And the answer was that they could. So we ended up with, I think, a good example of what happens when legislators actually work with conservatives on bills versus kind of coming up with these things in a vacuum and then coming to the conservative activists later when they want cover from the left-wing groups instead of working with us from the beginning. And I would say that's really with any issue. Now, I want to kind of show you guys a few more things here on this trans issue, because I got to say that training today got me kind of worked up. So here, let me share this photo with you. Let's see here. Okay, so I have these sources and they'll send me stuff. This is a photo of tampons in a men's bathroom at the University of Utah. Okay. And I just got to be honest with you that this to me is completely outrageous. And it also raises the question of whether Governor Cox has actually changed any of his positions. I hear from some conservatives that, Governor Cox, who pushed the reason we have the trans agenda throughout Utah's government is because of him. It was his efforts to embed it in our government that has caused us to be where we are today. But he's done some things to try to fix, I think, what happened after he vetoed HB 11. HB 11 was the bill that banned boys from girls' sports, and Governor Cox vetoed it. I think that was like in 2021, maybe. But he got a lot of blowback for that. And I've heard from people that a former governor went and talked to him and was like, you got to stop with this woke stuff. It's going to kill your ability to win re-election. And so he tried to course correct. The problem is, I don't think he actually really believes it. And so he hasn't truly course corrected at all. And we're getting kind of a cheapened version of what a conservative would look like. If he's actually course corrected, there should be no tampons in men's bathroom at the University of Utah. Like that, there's no need for that. Men don't use tampons. To quote this woman in this really funny video, she's like, where would they put them? So, and if you have to use a tampon, you're a woman. So just understand that. Nothing wrong with being a woman, but like that's women need them, not men. Now let me show you this is another one from the University of Utah. And this relates to other bathroom issues in Utah as well. And before I do this, though, let me just say, if you want to call in, feel free to call in. Again, the number is going to be 385-237-7960. I have my friend called. Let me just see if she wanted to talk on the radio show. Although I don't know if she's actually listening to it, so it'd be kind of weird. On a random, this is a totally random thing. So I have this friend lives in New Jersey, and there is this, I got a call once from this station in New Jersey, and they for a few weeks, they would call me once, or they would have they had a radio show, and I guess they were trying to make it go nationwide. And so they're like, hey, would you be willing to call in and make comments, and then we'll pay you. And it was like $2 a comment. It was something real. It was ridiculous. Like literally, they would send me like $2. And I did it a few times. It was kind of funny though, because I was like, I don't know. I guess this is a method to kind of like broaden the reach, right? You have people from all over the country commenting, and then you hope that other people will listen to the show. But it was a show in New Jersey, and I remember I told my friend, and she was like, "Why do they have you commenting on a show in New Jersey? That's so weird." And I was like, "I know, like, I don't understand it, but it's $2, $2 whole dollars." Okay, so this is a photo of a bathroom at the University of Utah. A friend of mine went there recently and said, "This is in an old building that they remodeled." And what you're seeing is this is a bathroom, and all like a bathroom that both genders share. Okay, so one of the things I've kind of noticed in Utah is a lot of people have all these issues with public bathrooms, right? You know, I mean, since the dawn of time. Well, I mean, maybe not. I don't know. Maybe not the dawn of time, but in my whole lifetime, my parents' whole lifetime, in public, there have been men's and women's bathrooms, right? And sometimes you have a single bathroom because you might need it for people with disabilities who need something, or families together. There's reasons for it, but you would have one. Right now, I hear this all the time in Utah. This push to make it so that we have more privacy in bathrooms because it's so uncomfortable. And I don't know what anyone's talking about. Like if you're in a public area and you have to go to the bathroom, you just go to the bathroom and then you just leave. This is not a big deal. And I don't understand why we're having to change everything because people are, to me, it seems like a lot of, this is from testimony I hear at different hearings that happen, but just way oversensitive about bathrooms. So anyway, let's look at this. I think it's interesting. This is University of Utah. Again, this is an old building. They remodeled it, and then this is the bathroom they put in. So this is your door to the bathroom. Tampons, and of course, it's tampons in there. Now, in this case, maybe it's more justified because both sexes can use this bathroom, so that means women are using it. And then this is what it looks like. So they have the floor to ceiling door and window for each toilet, and then a shared sink area. And men or women can use any of the stalls. I don't understand the purpose of this. This does not make sense to me on multiple levels. So first of all, for men, right, like a lot of times we can use a urinal, which is more efficient. So really, like in a men's room, you don't need as many stalls. You have more urinals and they move faster. Also, so I think like these types of bathroom situations actually disadvantage men and make us so we're spending way more time in the bathroom than we need to. Number two is I think the cleaning of this is going to be much more time consuming than cleaning like a regular bathroom. Number three, I can already tell you in a college or in a high school, if you have bathrooms like this, I will let your guys' imagination run a little wild. You know exactly what's going to happen in that bathroom. Okay. There will be sexual activity. There will be drug use. You are asking for it. And so I also don't understand it from that perspective because this is obviously that's where this is going to lead. And again, these are bathrooms in public areas. They don't need to look like this. This is just, and I think we're not thinking about all the problems that are going to occur because you have these instead of a traditional just public bathroom. So one other thing here I just want to point out, for all the talk about Governor Cox being a changed man, here's the University of Utah Health sponsoring the Trans Pride and Joy Festival. Kind of weird, right? If you've really changed on the trans issue, which I think is one of the most important issues that we're dealing with today because it is anti-reality. If you're religious, it's really anti-God. And it's the entire purpose of the trans agenda is to undermine the traditional family. And so when you see a public taxpayer-funded organization funding the Trans Pride and Joy Festival, that means that they support that. And that means that the University of Utah Health is actually supporting a philosophy, that actually is meant to undermine families and meant to undermine the traditional family, which in Utah we're supposed to be very protective of. So, okay, let me stop sharing for a second. Oh, there's like a simple button at the top. I keep missing it. Okay, so now there's a couple other things on this. So on this bathroom issue, the Granite School District also is doing the same thing for bathrooms. Now, initially, their design is a little bit different than what I just showed you. They have kind of like an all glass panel, then where you can look in, and then individual toilets with floor to ceiling doors, and then a shared sink area. They were initially going to let boys and girls use those together, which again, pretty obvious, I think, what's going to happen when you do that. And although I think, if I'm totally honest with you, I think a lot of LDS people think that their kids will not engage in those types of activities because, you know, they go to church every Sunday and they're probably teaching their kids to wait until marriage. But I just think that that type of a situation is tempting children with a space where they can do things that they normally could not. And so, you know, you want to be careful when you're designing bathrooms like that in a high school. Now the Granite School District, after some pushback, and also though, you know, in a high school, it's even more of an issue that you're going to have, I think, drug use in bathrooms like that. But Granite School Districts they kept the design, but they ended up splitting them by gender. So the way they did it is like the first and third floors would be girls only, and the second floor would be boys only. And again, though, it was this whole issue where parents are talking about how their kids are afraid to go to the bathroom, and you know, they need more privacy. And all I can think to myself is, how do you deal with the regular world? If you go to a national park, they don't have special bathrooms like that. I'll tell you, if you join the Army, they definitely do not have those types of bathrooms. If you ever, you know, like you get drug tested in the Army, you know, different, whatever, it's random. When they drug test you, they actually watch you pee in a cup. Like a guy, you know, one of your fellow soldiers will come with you. They will actually like watch you pee in the cup to make sure that it's you doing it and you're not doing any games to like get around having your own urine in the cup. And here's the thing. It's not like people come back and they're like, oh, like, you know, that guy is small, or this guy, like, there's no comments or anything. It's just, it is what it is. And I think what we're doing a disservice to kids by making them think that you're going to cater to them everywhere they go. Like, everybody has to go to the bathroom. It's not a big deal. And public bathrooms are designed the way they are because we're trying to you're trying to make them efficient. You're trying to keep them affordable, so we're not being burdened by massive taxes to build individual bathrooms everywhere. And you're trying to be kind of, I think, realistic about what the world looks like. And the final point I'll make on this is that during the last year, when we went and we asked the Salt Lake County Council to ban men from using women's locker rooms because they were allowing them to use women's locker rooms. Just for those of you who voted for Jenny Wilson, you voted for that. And what I was going to say, though, is that Lori Stringham talked about how the latest design is that you would have a common area where the lockers are. And I think there's a recreation center that has this. A common area for lockers, and then individual rooms with showers in them. And so then everybody uses the same locker room, and then you just go into a private shower to take a shower. And again, though, like, this is just it. You got to think about this again from the perspective of keeping this thing clean, keeping it maintained. What could happen in those showers? You're now going to put men and women together, but you're also going to you could have like pedophiles that go in there. They could take a kid into a shower. They could do stuff with them. Like, you are asking for problems with those types of designs. And the best privacy number one is if you're not comfortable in a locker room, don't go. Like, you don't have to change at the gym. You can go home and change. Number two is just, it's not that big of a, like, we shouldn't be making all of this such a big deal that we're causing people to get all sorts of anxiety over just a normal thing. It's just not a big deal. Going into a locker room to change is nothing but you're going into a locker room to change or to shower so that you can go off and do your stuff after you work out. Nothing wrong with it. And I think some of it is that Utah's culture seems just super sensitive about just normal everyday things. And the way I see it, though, is a lot of the parents grew up in a situation where we didn't have the same anxieties as what the kids today have. And so I don't know why the kids are feeling so much more anxious about normal everyday things. And then the parents aren't able to kind of tell them, like, hey, it's just normal, no biggie. I mean, I can tell you, like, for men or for boys, like, you know, obviously, like in a locker room, you're all probably gonna look different naked, right? Your equipment will be different sizes, but I don't think that's life. I think that's part of this. You're learning, like, hey, we're all different, no biggie, like, whatever, move on. And I just don't know that we're fully thinking these things through, and the risks of combining genders together in spaces like that, when there's a reason why these have been separated since the beginning of time. You know, so something to think about. Okay, now I'm going to switch topics here. That went on a little longer than I thought, but I took that training today and that got me really worked up. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is, again, I want to go back to this. We'll talk some more about our conversation from last week about the clerk's race for 2026 and the Salt Lake County District Attorney's race as well, because I got some information that I think would be helpful, but it kind of shows the need for it. What it will demonstrate is how useful it would be to have a Salt Lake County GOP that's more effective and more focused on winning those marquee races. Because we'll have leadership elections coming up in March or April. If we can get better leadership in place, and like I said, I've had people call me and tell me that they're going to run, who have that vision and understand strategy and execution, I think we can turn this around and we can flip some of these races in 26. If we don't get that kind of leadership in there, I can already tell you we'll lose in 26 as well. But that is not my goal. My goal is to win. I love winning. And we haven't done enough of it, which I think is why, like, it's so exciting to see Trump win. And then it helps deal with all the losses of Salt Lake County. So let me just, and we talked about this before, the Salt Lake County GOP actually had a pretty bad 2024, with the county actually shifting further left. We lost, I think it was a treasurer's race that we held before. We held, I believe, the surveyor and D. Theodore's seats, but the margins dropped. We lost some very winnable races. I think the mayor's race was very winnable. The recorder's race was very winnable, especially after she engaged in electioneering, where she sent out a flyer with everybody's property tax bill. It was the most brazen electioneering I think I've ever seen. And she still won, which is just wild to me. And also that our at-large county council seat that we lost. That was one of the closer races, but still, it was something that I think was very winnable, and we lost it. And I don't 100% blame the candidates for it, because I think, unfortunately, the party didn't set the foundation for them to run on as to why we needed a change. And you kind of see it now in the press, actually, where it's really clear to me that the trans agenda is a massive loser with voters once they learn about it. I think I have multiple family members that have turned hard against the Democrats after learning what the trans agenda is about, how it targets children. They have children, and they don't want their kids being taught about sex at young ages. They don't want their kids being taught they can change their sex. They don't want weird big books being put in schools, and it turns them very hard against Democrats because they don't understand why you would want to put this stuff in the schools. But if you look at the press in Utah, they're still attacking our like Republicans for as anti-trans or whatever for not wanting the trans agenda or for wanting to eliminate the trans agenda from Utah. I mean, you should see the attacks on Speaker Schultz. Like I said, I don't agree with him on everything, but I commend him. I am thankful that he gave money to that PAC so that they could go and advertise against Democrats for their support of the trans agenda. Now, to give Speaker Schultz some more credit, I think we as a party need to do a better job educating the public about the trans agenda, the problems with it, because his spending would have been more effective if people understood the issue better, right? And I think maybe that should be one of our things over the next couple of years is let's double down. Let's get out there. Let's talk to people about the agenda itself. Let's talk, I mean, like this crazy thing I told you about today where you can change the sex on your birth certificate. You don't even need to get sex reassignment surgery. There are states that actually completely ban that. Florida bans it. They don't even allow you to change your sex on your birth certificate. I would prefer that we actually move to that direction. I don't think we should be indulging people's mental health problems. And what they're always telling me, the left, is less than 1% of the population is trans. And so then we really don't need to be doing all these things for them, right? Okay, so let's talk some more about this, the Salt Lake County clerk's race. And I think part of what I was talking about last week is that, you know, we cannot depend on the media to expose the Democrats that are in office. I think that has been shown repeatedly. You can't, like, they're not going to do it. Most of them are Democrats. We have some good reporters. I don't want to say that they're all bad, but there's a lot of issues that they won't touch. They may not know enough about them to do it. So we actually have to do it. Republicans have to do the work to expose the I got a comment. Percival says, why are you obsessed with other people's genitals? I am not at all. I am obsessed with not sexualizing children with the trans agenda, as I have said repeatedly, and letting them live a healthy life in their birth gender, and not encouraging people or indulging their mental health problems. So, and I will continue to do that. I don't care what anybody else says to me about it. And obviously, I thank you for the comment. So I thought you were missing today. I didn't see any comments earlier. So, but anyway, we actually have to do the work to get out there and to educate the public and about what's going on in these offices. And we have to find the stories. And that's why I'd said that we need to have committees set up at the party level to be able to dig into these different offices. Now, I went through some issues with the Salt Lake County Clerk's office that were older, And so here's a new issue that just came up recently. I'll answer your question in a couple minutes, Percival. So I think this is actually really interesting. If you've noticed, the Utah County Clerk, Aaron Davidson, has come under a lot of fire from the Lieutenant Governor. The Lieutenant Governor is very obsessed with, or maybe I should put it, I'll use their terminology. She is harassing the Utah County Clerk. I use that terminology on purpose because what you'll notice is that white women in the Republican Party, they will accuse everybody of harassing them. All you have to do is send them an email, disagree with them on something, and then they will literally turn around and accuse you of harassment. The most notorious example of that is Amy Winder Newton. By the way, she went by Amy Newton until she decided to run for office. And then she pulled in her grandfather's last name so she could sully it because she's a Democrat. And then now if you oppose her, she'll accuse you of harassment. And so my recommendation to anybody that has any interactions with her is never, ever, ever have a one-on-one conversation with Amy. If she tries to talk to you one-on-one, you should walk away. It's not worth it because she will literally turn around and accuse you of harassment. I have never had a one-on-one conversation with her because when I sense crazy, I keep crazy away from me. and I know she's crazy. So, but anyway, I think the lieutenant governor is harassing Aaron Davidson. And let me give you an example of why. In the 2024 general election, Aaron Davidson saved Utah County taxpayers $73,000 in postage costs. He did this in two ways. One, he increased the number of people using drop boxes from 60% to 76%. If somebody uses a drop box, then you don't have to pay for the postage for them. And this is actually a good thing because it helps with chain of custody, right? Basically, it cuts down the number of people that are touching your ballots. So that's a good thing. Then he stopped prepaying postage. Now this caused a little bit of a controversy because people said, oh, you should have to, if you don't prepay postage, what happens to the ballot? Well, a couple of things. One is under Utah law, the clerk's offices are not required to prepay postage on your mail ballot. And in fact, I would say to those of you that use a mail ballot, you should pay for the postage. It's your ballot. You're not paying for my ballot because I don't mail one in. I go and I vote in person. And so maybe it's time for those of the people who want to use the mail ballot and stick it in the mail to pay their own postage. But what's interesting is that federal law requires that a ballot that is mailed has to be delivered to the clerk's office, even if there's no postage on it. Now, the difference is this, that if you prepay postage, the cost is higher. So it's 73 cents plus 14.4 cents plus a 14.4 cent handling fee. So it's about 88 cents a ballot if you prepay postage. If you do not prepay postage and instead you stick your ballot in the mail without postage on it and it gets delivered to the clerk's office is just charged the postage charge, 73 cents. They're not charged the handling fee. So if Salt Lake County, okay, let me just hold on. Oh, this is the other piece, sorry. In Utah County, it turned out that 78% of those who use the mail option put their own stamp on it. So only 22% of the people who used a mail who used the mail to turn in their ballot did not put a stamp on it. Out of those 22%, one of them was Mike McKell, the governor's brother-in-law. If you know anything about Mike McKell, he's super wealthy, has tons of money to buy fancy horses, but apparently is too cheap to put a stamp on his ballot. So just something to keep in mind when you hear Mike McKell bitching and moaning about how everybody now knows that he's too cheap to put a stamp on his ballot. So now I just want to point this out. So in Salt Lake County, so like I said, in Utah County, Aaron Davidson spent a lot of time encouraging people to use ballot drop boxes. If you are going to use a mail ballot, that is actually the best way to turn it in is through the ballot drop box because that cuts down on the number of people, third parties who handle your ballot. When you put it in the mail, a postman picks it up, they process it, you don't know how many other people touch it, and then they turn it over to your clerk's office. So you at least have, let's say, 3 people in there that are not in your clerk's office touching your ballot. If you put it into the ballot drop box, employees of the clerk's office or other government employees in Salt Lake County, it would be the sheriff's office. They go and they pick up those ballots and they take them into the clerk's office. So you cut down on the non-local government people who are touching your ballot when you use a ballot drop box. So in Salt Lake County under Lanny Chapman, ballot drop box use was only 62%. So if we ended up, oh, here's what I have. Okay. So sorry, just go back a second here. So if we stop prepaying postage in Salt Lake County, but the numbers all stayed the same as what they were, the 62%, using a ballot drop box, I think we would have saved $23,194 in postage costs in the 2024 general election. So now if we did not prepay for postage and had the same rate of stamp usage, so both, we would have saved $114,000 in the general election alone in Salt Lake County. If we just increased the use of ballot drop boxes from 62%, that's what we had this year, to 76%, what Utah County had, Salt Lake County would save $47,000 in postage costs. This is significant, and that's just in the general election. So just think about how much that adds up over more and more elections. We're in this high inflation environment where our taxes have skyrocketed and costs just keep going up and up and up. And this would have been a great way to save some money. But unfortunately, Lanny Chapman, the Salt Lake County clerk, is just not smart or innovative. And so you're not going to see that coming out of her office, because this requires kind of a deep dive into the laws, like what Aaron Davidson's office did, to figure out what your parameters are that you're working with, and then to find creative solutions so that you can save money. And we want these offices to start saving some money, because I think our election system has become very complicated and very expensive. So if we could get to more of what has happened in Utah County, it would be a great benefit to us. Now, the other reason she won't do it is because I think that Lanny Chapman was supported by Deidre Henderson. And so she probably feels some, loyalty to Deidre. And maybe she doesn't want to be harassed by Deidre either. Because if you look at how Deidre Henderson treats Aaron Davidson, it's kind of crazy. I wouldn't want that either. Now, let me talk about the Salt Lake County District Attorney's race, but I'll answer Percival's question. So Percival wants to know, why is it your business if children are being sexualized by trans activists? It's my business because I believe that as adults, we are required to protect children and to protect their innocence and to let them live the same types of healthy lives that we got to live, where people weren't pushing a false, the trans agenda is just fake, telling people that they can change their sex, teaching kids about sex when they're really young. All of that stuff is just wrong, and we need to stop it. So that's why it's my business. I may not have children, but I'll fight to protect your kids from activists that want to push the trans agenda on them any day of the week. So, and I'll also, I was also involved in efforts the last legislative session to change the laws around the duty to report child sex abuse from clergy members. Under the old law, they're still not required to do it. But I worked with Representative Lubay to change it, to increase the incentives for them to report when they learn about child sex abuse from the perpetrator during a confession. So, I strongly believe that as adults, we have an obligation to be out there and be trying to protect children from all sorts of abuse, whether that's sexual abuse or physical abuse, but also this abusive situation where people push the trans agenda on them and try to convince kids that they're something that they're not. Like, you can't change your sex. And I'll just add one other piece to this. As someone who is gay, if the trans agenda had been promoted like it is today, they would have targeted me, because that's typically how it works. They target little boys who have tendencies that are more feminine. And they, when they do that, those are the types of kids that they go after. And typically, though, when those kids get gender dysphoria, if you let them go through puberty, they'll grow out of it. The majority of them actually end up becoming gay. It's something like 70 or 80%. And I think, unfortunately, there is an activist component that would prefer that those kids, instead of being gay, that they be trans so that they can be straight again. And I think it's better to be in your birth sex that functions properly, so that you can have, like a normal adult life and have normal adult relationships. And I'm not going to support an agenda that takes that away from little children who have no idea what being an adult is like, or, what lays in the future for them. So that's an answer to your question. Thank you for the question. Keep on asking. Okay. So the Salt Lake County District Attorney's race is going to be a big one in 2026. And we lost this in 2022 as well. And I think something to notice. I kind of wish, maybe I should ask Danny on if she'd be willing to come on at some point to talk about that race in 22. Maybe if she has some observations about it. But Sim Gill is someone that is, I think, heavily protected. But also, in order to win that office, you're going to need a committee actually dedicated to that office. That is your biggest office that's up for election in 2026. And it's an extremely active office because he prosecutes crimes. He also defends the county civilly. And so there's going to be tons of lawsuits going on. And you actually have to go through and track those lawsuits to see what he's doing. Is he a soft on crime prosecutor? Well, the only way to figure that out is to go through the cases he's filing, see how they're being resolved, look at the cases he's not filing, see what if there's any commonalities there. And I don't know that we're doing that. But I thought one of the things that's kind of interesting is that there are rumors, pretty strong ones, that Sim is actually a Soros prosecutor. And if you want to make this an issue in 2026, we're going to have to lay the groundwork at a time, right? So I actually got a tip about how to look at this from the Sim Gill perspective. But, I'm only one guy, as I've said before. And that's why I think if the Salt Lake County GOP had a committee set up for this, they could really be focused on trying to figure out his Soros connections and expose them. And the other piece of this is that I think some of that connection actually comes from Lanny Chapman. So as I've mentioned before, she went to one of the worst law schools in the country. It's a little bit unclear why a prosecutor of an office in a county with almost 1.3 million people went and recruited somebody from Michigan who went to one of the worst law schools in the country. And I'm a lawyer, and I can tell you that most of my friends that I know just went to the best law school they could get into. So if that was the best you could get into, that's pretty bad. And then, and that law school matters, especially earlier in your career. Like at this point, I don't think it matters. I've been practicing more than 20 years. So it's kind of like, you can look at my actual record. But when you're initially getting out of law school, it's really important. People look at that and employers look at that. And especially a big prosecutor's office should have no problem recruiting from the best law schools in the country. So I still have that open question, like, why did he recruit Lanny Chapman out of, I think she's from Western Michigan, from a dumpy law school, and bring her to Salt Lake County? What, were you that bad at recruiting? Now, let me just add that the Soros connection, here, I'll show you where I found one place it's mentioned. And let me just add because I'm going to have to scroll down, but it says that to be on this list, a prosecutor, actually I can share this, hold on. That way if you're watching me, you can see it. Okay. So here you go. Can you see it? I cannot see you. Okay, there we go. Okay. So to be included on this list, a prosecutor must either have received a direct campaign contribution from a Soros-backed group or benefited from a Soros-backed group's independent expenditures in his or her election, attended a private convening of a Soros-backed prosecutor group, or signed a pledge or statement from select Soros-backed prosecutor group. Okay. Then if you scroll down to Utah, this is going to move kind of fast. So here you go. Sim Gill. Okay. So, so he's on this list, right? But I don't think that list by itself is sufficient for Utah's voters. If you know anything about Utah's voters, number one is they are extremely squeamish about the whole Soros thing. And it's because the media has told them that if you say anything bad about Soros, you're anti-Semitic. I think I told you guys a story before where when I was running for the House seat, I had a delegate actually say to me, you said something bad about Soros. I can't vote for you. I'm leaning against voting for you because you said something bad about Soros, and I think that is anti-Semitic. We ended up having a discussion about it because I don't think most people care about Soros's ethnicity. He's not, in his own words, he's not a practicing Jew, but he is of Jewish ethnicity. And so I don't think anyone cares about that. I don't like the policies he pushes. He pushes for radical prosecutors that don't want to enforce the law and are and have their sympathies with criminals over victims and society in general. He pushes county clerks and secretaries of states to try to undermine the security of our election system and the transparency of it as well. So we should all oppose Soros, but we have to get through to these voters about why it's okay to talk about this and why you shouldn't think that just because someone says something bad about Soros, that our issue with him is that he has Jewish ethnicity. The issue is the policies that he pushes with his money. I don't have the same qualms about an Elon Musk type because I think on the main issue, and that is the free speech issue, I like what he's done with X. I think we needed a free speech platform, and I support that. Do I support everything that he wants? No, of course not. I mean, he's not. I don't think he's as conservative as I am. So now in the 2024, I'll tell you why it's important. In the 2024 election, 12 of the 25 Soros-linked prosecutors on the ballot lost. The biggest one, I think, was actually LA County, where a Republican won for the first time in a long time and knocked the Soros prosecutor out. So I think we have an opportunity in 20. So people have shown that they're tired of these Soros-backed prosecutors and their soft on crime approaches. So I think we have an opportunity to end Sim Gill's reign, but we have to build the case with voters. So let me just, here we go. Okay, so I got a call last week, sometime over last week, I got a call from somebody I know, and the person told me that the place to look, they think, for Sim Gill and these Soros connections is at the conferences that he has. Okay, so let me kind of pull this up for you. I have an example. I thought this was kind of interesting. Let me also add that if you want to call, the number is 385-237-7960. And now I cannot find my article. Hold on. Let's see here. Give me 1 second and I'll pull this up for you. You know, sometimes I get it a little off. Okay, here we go. So, and this is actually from October of this year. Let's see here. I'll share my screen with you again. So actually I saw News Dispatch. So, and this was about a conference that Sim Gill held this year. I think some of this is kind of fascinating, right? So at the beginning of the article, it says, as a young prosecutor, Sim Gill would see the same faces cycle through the courtroom. They often had chronic health issues, struggled to find housing, work, or childcare, were plagued by poor mental health, or battled drug addiction. Lots of excuses to commit crime. Because and this is what I mean, there's other people that will have similar issues. Give me 1 second, I think we're getting a call. Hello? Do you have a comment? Okay. Okay, I'm gonna put you on speaker. Hold on. Okay. Okay, so we got Tracy on the line. Hi, Tracy.
Hi, Goud.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. If you want to go in and comment.
Yeah, you were talking about the George Soros. I think I wonder if a lot of people know about him and what his money does and what kind of influence. Have you explained that a little bit?
Oh, that's a good, maybe, do you think that's what it is, that people don't understand how he uses his money? And maybe that's...
Yeah, I think they don't understand what he uses his money for and like how he uses it to influence. I think a lot of people believe that's just, if the people that are in into politics. They don't pay attention or whatever. I think they just think that's like some bad person that people talk about, but they don't really understand like what he actually does and how he influences elections and how he infiltrates your school systems and he drives a lot of policy, and I don't think people understand that who he is really.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, the way he does the funding though is, and I have explained this before, that he doesn't really directly fund candidates. This came up in 2022 when I ran for the clerk's office and Soros donated to the ODP Utah PAC. Brian Schott wrote a piece and he would comment on Twitter saying, he would use the word direct very specifically and say, there are no direct donations from Soros to Lanny Chapman. But, if you understand how Soros operates, he never puts direct donations. He funnels them through multiple groups to get to those end candidates, right?
Right.
And so I don't know if people know that. And then also, yeah, to your point, I think he's a genius. And he's generally way ahead of his time. So with like this, he had the Secretary of State project. I think that started in the early 2000s under George Bush, when George Bush was president, George W. Bush.
Yeah.
I mean, just think about the foresight involved in that. And that was, they mask it in all these fancy terms, right? We're going to elect secretaries of states that will protect democracy and ensure that every vote is counted. But the reality of what it does is it's people who will undermine the security of the election system, make it less transparent,
yeah.
etc.
Usually does the opposite of what they tell you. And yeah. I think we have a really naive culture here, because we don't think anybody is really going to, why would somebody take our elections, or, why would they push such bad influence? I don't think a lot of people believe it. And so sometimes they take money not knowing that it's going to obligate them, and that's what happens. You take money from these type of organizations, they feel like you owe them and that they're going to control you over it.
Oh, that's interesting. I haven't thought about it that way. Like you're kind of suggesting that elected officials don't realize what they're signing up for.
I think some of them don't. I think they learn, so they shouldn't always do it. Because I had a situation where somebody took some money from a developer, and he's a really good guy. He ended up being a good guy, but I called him out on it, and then he saw how it appeared, because he made a decision later on a land use decision, and it appeared that he was going to rule in his favor because the guy donated it to his campaign. The difference between this candidate, it showed what kind of character he had. He never took money again.
Oh,
He was like, he didn't even want like the appearance of it. And I do think that was the naive first of someone, running for the first time and you don't know, but he sure corrected it. And so to me, once you learned it about it and you don't correct it and you continue to take the money, it just shows who your character is, because you can't play the naive card forever, especially after you first get in.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. I think it's our council member, right?
Yeah, and he's ended up being he's been excellent in representation, and he's all about transparency now. Like he's been really good.
And he's been great on land use issues. I mean, talk about a huge change. Yeah.
He's been really good. I've been impressed by him. So I think that does, and that situation kind of taught me and opened my eyes. Like I'm like, oh, maybe people don't know that that's going to happen.
Yeah, but I think with that, you'd have to kind of understand how sophisticated the person is, right? So I can agree with you for like a Riverton City Council member. It's a smaller office and less kind of partisan stuff goes on down here, right?
Right.
But then when you have somebody like, and I'll just use this, like Amy Winder Newton going and raising money for Equality Utah, I actually think she's very sophisticated, and she knew exactly what she was doing when she did that.
She did.
Yeah.
I 100% agree.
So it probably just depends on the candidate. I think Sim Gill is also very sophisticated. He's been in office since 2010, and he's a prolific fundraiser. And he's a solid, like, he knows how to win elections, right?
Right.
And we haven't figured out the formula to defeat him yet.
Right. And my point is the innocence of, like, our councilman. He ran for the right reasons. He ran to service his community, but that would be the normal individual too. They would not know that these people are taking money, and they wouldn't understand what's bad about it until you can talk about it and show exactly why you don't want to take this kind of money. This is what happens. They influence you. You feel obligated. It looks like you'll do decisions for them. So that's the reason you don't want to take this kind of money.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. That's kind of interesting. So I guess that's another factor to think about with all of this, the money, and then how to think about it when it comes to candidates, right?
Yeah, and how to explain it to the everyday individual voter that has never ran and wouldn't know that stuff kind of goes on, and most people don't even probably look at, well, who's donating to this people before I vote, and so that would be a good thing to teach a voter, is when you are researching these candidates, try to see who's donating to them, where are they getting their money.
But
and then that will help you be more educated too when you vote.
See, I think it's easier with our city council candidates because they get fewer donations. But if you go to the Salt Lake County Clerk's website and look up financial disclosures, they're actually extremely difficult to navigate. I sent an email to Lanny Chapman about this because one of the things that they do is they allow people to, instead of inputting each individual donation or expense into their electronic system, they allow them to write it on, like, do these spreadsheets and then PDF it, and it's not searchable.
Oh, that's terrible.
Yeah, and so it makes it so, like, some of these the Democrats especially have tons and tons of donors. It's extremely difficult to comb through that. And even if you download it, because of the way that they set these up, you can't actually search it. And I've struggled with it a lot.
It bugs me when I don't like to download from the government. I swear they're hacking my computer if I do that.
Probably. Yeah, right. They're gonna show up at your door.
Anyways, but I just wanted to make that comment. So thanks for having your show.
Yeah, thanks for calling in. Bye. Okay, well, that was good. So, that is something to think about. I think, like I said, though, with someone like Sim Gill or someone like Lanny Chapman, these are actually very sophisticated operators. And so I would not give them any sort of leeway in terms of what they know and do not know. Now, as I just wanted to read this first part. So then he says, like, Sim Gill, as his career progressed, he would start to see their children often with the same needs as their parents. So he's seeing people with chronic health issues, struggling to find housing, work, or childcare, were plagued by poor mental health, or battle drug addiction. As I said a minute ago, I think these are excuses to be able to commit crimes, because you'll have people who have these exact same issues that don't commit crimes, right? And so we actually insult those people when we say that, use these as excuses. Now, then he says, I've been doing this long enough now that I'm seeing their grandchildren. So I kind of wonder here, if he saw their children. He's been a prosecutor. I think he's somewhere else that says in the article for 27 years. He's been the Salt Lake County District Attorney since 2010. So it's been 14 years. It'll be 16 when he's running for re-election. If he hasn't broken this cycle with criminals, so that first it was the parent, first it was one set, then it was their children, now it's their grandchildren, it may be time for a new prosecutor, right? Maybe he's just not up for the job. Now, this article So he brought in a bunch of prosecutors from around the country to talk reform. Okay, so then let's go down. And he brought in John Choi. This is the Ramsey County District Attorney. This is one of the counties around Minneapolis. So, we had Tim Walz, right, was the Democrat nominee for vice president. He's the governor of Minnesota. Minnesota is it is left wing, although it's surprisingly, I bet you it could be a flip state or a swing state if they focused on it a little bit more. But it is pretty left wing, and they have all the bad left wing policy. Every bad left wing idea has been implemented in Minnesota. So, including soft on crime policies. So here, now remember, Sim Gill brought this guy to talk at his conference. Okay, so and here's what the article says. John Choi's innovative solutions included a new policy from Ramsey County in Minnesota, where County Attorney John Choi stopped prosecuting cases that stemmed from non-public safety traffic stops. Instances where police stopped a car because of an expired registration, no license plate lights, a cracked windshield or window tint, then searched the vehicle and discovered drugs or weapons. So if you have this, they say non-public safety traffic stop, although I would think that if your license plate lights are off, maybe that's a public safety issue. Maybe if your headlight's not working, it's a public safety issue. They pull you over, they get reasonable suspicion, they search your car, and then they find drugs or guns. This guy is not going to prosecute you for that. Explain to me how that is actually helpful. They pulled you over, and they literally just found that's according. Well, the drugs were illegal drugs, but the weapon, you could have a legal weapon, but we're going to assume it's illegal. They found contraband in your vehicle, and now the prosecutor is saying, as part of his great reform, he's not going to prosecute the person for the crime. How do you think that actually helps crime? Now, he said that officers would only find contraband in about 2% of the vehicle searches, and they always turn this into a race thing, because it says here. So he says, this is John Choi. I think we've been thinking too much about the 2% and not enough about the 98% and what that does to trust in our legal system and policing. If my license plate light is out and a police officer pulls me over to tell me that, it doesn't make me question the legal system or policing. I live in Riverton, so really it just makes me think I should probably fix the light on my license plate, right? Now, according to data from the Justice Innovation Lab, it showed that Black drivers are 4 times as likely to be stopped and 9 times as likely to be searched as white drivers. Now, they always try to make these a race issue, but you have to actually, like, a broad figure like that is not helpful, because you have to be thinking about what's causing them to get pulled over. So, for example, if you looked earlier, it said that people are being pulled over because they had an expired registration. If it's expired, you can expect to get pulled over. No license plate lights, a cracked windshield or window tint are in his area of the country. Are Black residents more likely to have those things? I don't know the answer to that, but you need way more information to know if the figure cited by that Justice Innovation Lab is a problem. The point here, though, is, why did Sim Gill bring John Choi to speak at his conference? Does he support not prosecuting people for crimes because the illegal drugs in the car were found after they were pulled over for having an expired registration? If that's the case, we should know that, because that is a soft on crime policy. And these are the types of questions we need to ask. But the only way to get to the bottom of this is we need more people working on it. And I'll tell you that the source who called me said that in a previous year, Sim Gill actually had the prosecutor who prosecuted Kyle Rittenhouse come and speak at one of his events. Now, Kyle Rittenhouse is an example of self-defense. That was 100% self-defense. He should never have been prosecuted. And I'd like to know. Well, I want to know if that's true. And so I guess I'll have to go file a grammar request to figure it out. But again, I'm only one guy, right? And I have limited time, but it would be helpful if we had, if we get new leadership of the Salt Lake County GOP and we're able to kind of start digging into these offices, we can really find a lot of information and start building the case so that we can defeat Sim Gill in 2026. The reality of this, and so let me just add another couple of things here, but the reality is that Republicans have not shown an ability to raise money like the Democrats do for these local races. And when I say that, I mean, Rochelle Morris was the one outlier in the fundraising. That's the first time I've really seen a Republican outraise a Democrat in a county race. Yeah, because even in 2020, Trent Staggs, when he ran for county mayor, raised $500,000, but Jenny Wilson raised $750,000. So Rochelle Morris, that's notable. That's good on her for being able to raise money like that. But for the most part, Republicans don't have that ability. The Democrats have a huge, rich donor base. Because if you look at polling and kind of exit polling, the parties have flipped. They've completely switched. The Democrats are the party of elite, college-educated liberals. I was going to say white people, but it's more than white people. It's college-educated, especially postgraduate. That's where it gets really heavily Democrat. So like your lawyers, your doctors, obviously your college professors, heavy Democrat, versus the Republican Party, which is more working class. And so we don't have that same kind of, our base is not as wealthy as their base. I don't have a problem with that because I think our base tends to be more patriotic. Our base tends to be the ones that go and fight the wars. We fight a lot of wars we don't need to be in, but it's our base that has the patriotism to go and fight those wars. It's our base that builds the country. As a lawyer myself, I can tell you, I'm not building the country by doing legal work, but the men and women who are actually on the ground, building the roads, building the buildings, making sure we're safe, making sure that they can put out fires. These are the people that are actually building the country, going in, extracting minerals and oil from the ground. That's all. Manufacturing, all these things we manufacture, all that stuff is how you build the country. And overwhelmingly, those people have turned into Republicans, and I think it's great. So we just have a different base, and the Democrats have shown that their base is more. I think they have a lot more reliable voters who are high propensity. So that's kind of a challenge for us, but also that they'll give tons and tons of money. These are people who. The other piece of it is typically Democrats don't believe in God. They're not part of any sort of organized religion. And that means that they think government is religion. That void will always get filled by something. And so for some of them, it's the environment, right? They believe in Mother Earth, God is Earth or whatever. Some of them, it's the trans agenda, right? And that, I think that, and it's government. They believe in experts to a point where they won't even question them. I saw something recently where they were talking about, RFK Jr. for the HHS secretary, which I think is fantastic, right? We need to ask questions about everything about our food system and about our health system, because it's clearly not working. I don't know how we spend so much money and we have such an unhealthy population. But they were saying, Trump has said he wants RFK Jr. to look into the connection or the potential connection between vaccines and autism in children, autism in general. And the media is just, hair on fire. But if it's not true, then why do you care if people look at it? I just don't understand. But that's an example of kind of the types of changes that can come about when you have better leadership. Now, we'll get on to our last little topic here. I posted in our last 21 minutes. Again, if you want to call in, it is 385 237-7960. And like I said earlier, if you want to, oh, great. If you want to call, give me 1 second. I'm using a new computer. I'm going to tell you guys kind of a weird story, but you might understand it if you've ever lost your job. So, I got fired from the software company because they didn't like my politics. When they did it, they offered to let me keep my computer or buy it. They were like, oh, you could, and it was a really nice computer, right? Because, it's my work computer. It's really nice. And it was like $200 to buy this computer. And I should have bought it. And I knew at the time that I should have bought it. I thought to myself, like, Goud, you should just swallow your pride, buy the computer. But I was just like, oh, F you. I'm not buying your computer. You take your computer and shove it. And then I went and I bought myself like a $200 computer at at Costco. It was on clearance. So it was originally like $300. And needless to say, it's a piece of crap. So it's causing me and so I'm trying a new computer today that my brother-in-law was nice enough to give me. Well, it's not new. It's an old computer he had that is a little bit better maybe than what I had. And so, and we'll see if this works. Oh, here we go. Okay, I found it. Okay, I'll put this on the screen. Okay, so anyway, I don't know if this is working better for you guys. I'm hoping it does. Let me share my screen again, and I'll share with you the tweet here. Okay, can you guys see that? There you go. Okay. And so this tweet actually, so what happens is after the show is a lot of times I'll get feedback from people saying different things to me like, oh, this was interesting, that was interesting, whatever. I posted this tweet and, let me just add, I agree with the original tweet here of the person that says, I think our biggest problem is that we treat racism like it's our biggest problem. I don't really think America has a big racism problem. I actually think the bigger issue is that we give special treatment to white women, and especially liberal white women. And this is not a new phenomenon. I think sometimes people think it is, but my father and his friends used to talk about this when they were working. So, in the 80s and 90s. It's not a new phenomenon at all. But I want to preface this by saying this. I don't think anybody should be discriminated against or in favor of based on innate qualities. So like race, sex, sexual orientation, ethnicity, you should be judged based on your actual talent and capabilities. And except now, there's one thing I think we should remove from our non-discrimination statutes, and that is gender identity. And the reason is this: in our current law, we protect gender identity as a protected classification, but as what was his name? God, one of the justices during that case last week pointed out, gender identity is not immutable. It's actually something that can change and that you can change your mind about. And Alito said this. And so he asked the question, and the trans lawyer the trans lawyer argued that agreed that it's not an immutable characteristic, so it really should not be protected as under our non-discrimination laws. But I'll just add another piece to this. The problem with protecting gender identity is that then what you get is these middle-aged men who transition, typically, and it happens a lot in middle age. You probably all, in Utah, everybody probably knows someone like this. They transition later in life, and typically they're not actually transgender. They actually suffer from what's called autogynephilia. And what autogynephilia is, it's when you get sexually aroused, when you're a man and you get sexually aroused when people treat you like a woman. It's a sexual fetish. And so if we protect gender identity under our non-discrimination statutes, we're then forced to hire people like that into our schools so that they're around our children. And what that means is that every single time your child talks to a trans woman, and let me add this, a majority of men who transition have autogynephilia. There are studies that show that. And so when you are, but we have to hire them though and put them into our schools. And when we do that, that means that every time your child goes up to that man and treats him like a woman, he's getting sexually aroused by it. And I just don't think that we should be having children participate in someone else's sexual fetish like that. That's just gross. And so we really need to think about our laws and changing how they operate. I don't understand our current setup. It's kind of strange to me. So something to think about. And I think Alito's comments during that argument actually help it more, because if it's not an immutable characteristic and it's something that can be changed, it really shouldn't be in our anti-discrimination laws, because you're choosing to be that thing. Now, under our current laws, we treat white women the same as any racial minority. So if you hire a white woman into your board of directors, it's considered diverse, the same type of diversity as if you hire a minority male. And so let me show you an example. Hold on, I'm gonna just stop sharing for a second. I don't like you guys to see everything on my screen. Not that there's anything here that's like secretive, but you never know, right? So I'm gonna use this Domo as an example. This is a local, I think, tech company or something. And you can kind of, we'll just scroll through this so you can see what I'm talking about. Here we go. Now, I'm just going to add, I am making assumptions that the people here are, if they look and if their names are kind of like white people's names, that they're probably white, right? So you can see here, here's a racial minority. Let's see here. I like this guy's beard. That's pretty cool. And another racial minority. So and there's 15 executives here, right? You have 2 racial minorities. And so that would be, it's 13% of the executives are racial minorities. If you count women, because if you notice, there were, I think, 4 white women in here. So 2, 3, 4 white. This one, I think she's white. This is a white name, I think. So then it ends up being 40% minority. And so you see, that's how this works, is because you count white women as the exact same as being a racial minority, you end up with a situation where the women, where they're being counted the same. And so it makes it easier to meet this, I guess, whatever quota that you're coming up with. It just strikes me as being a little bit dishonest about what these companies are allegedly trying to do. And if you think that there's racism, now I've said I don't actually think we have a big racism problem in America. But if you are someone that thinks there's racism, and you've now made white women the equivalent of racial minorities, people who are hiring, let's say that they're white and they are racist, according to your own words, they're obviously going to pick the white women over the minorities, right? It kind of makes sense. And so I don't think it makes sense from that perspective that you would treat them the same. Now, let me also show you another one I want to show you. I only want to show you this because this is the one for Qualtrics. And I thought this one was kind of fascinating because it's a very white executive team. It's a big executive team, but it struck me as being very white, especially considering that Ryan Smith, the founder of it, is so into DEI programs. By the way, I love this guy's name, Zig. How cool is that? It's almost as cool as Goud. Anyway, so the point here is if you scroll, there's a lot of executives here. Here's a racial minority. You'll notice there are not a lot of racial minorities, which is surprising because Ryan Smith is all about DEI programs. He runs a scholarship where he actually specifically discriminates against white kids. So, he does that, but then his own company doesn't, the executive team at his own company is actually not very diverse. And so that kind of surprised me. I guess I would have expected him to practice what he preaches, but I guess that would be asking too much. And it would be better if he just didn't, discriminate, and then we wouldn't have a problem. Now, the other one I thought was interesting. Oh, and remember, I did want to mention this. Governor Cox supports Ryan Smith discriminating against white kids because his own kids get scholarships through that. It's like the Governor's Honors Academy, where they all get to go. They all earned it. So, don't get twisted. They're all just much smarter than your kids. They're super duper intelligent. They all worked really hard on a farm in Fairview. They're farmers' kids, and they earned those scholarships. 3 of the 4 of them earned a scholarship to SUU, full ride, while your kids, who are not as intelligent as their kids and not as talented, just could not compete. So did one of Amy Winder Newton's sons, and so did one of Mike McCall's sons. But do not ask any questions, because I'm telling you right now, they are all way smarter than your kids will ever be. Ain't that the truth? Okay, so if you look at companies generally, that is what you will see, is the way that they all talk a big game about diversity. And then you look at their executive ranks, and it's typically going to be a lot of white men and white women, and then not very many racial minorities. And that's where I think you see it, what I'm talking about, that these white women get promoted over minority men. And I'll just tell you, I went to this Salt Lake County Bar Association party. This is when I was running for county clerk, because normally I wouldn't go to events like that because hanging out with a bunch of lawyers is typically pretty boring. And that event was what I would call boring. The alcohol was flowing freely. When I ran for office, I didn't drink at all, really, because the reality is the last thing you want to do is have one too many, or even, in my case, even one, because sometimes I feel like one drink kind of gets me a little bit, I don't think I can think as clearly. And all you got to do is say one thing wrong, and then it'll be everywhere. So when you're running for office, there's a tip for anyone that drinks: not worth drinking when you're running for office. But I went to this event, and I think the outgoing president or chairman of the Salt Lake County Bar Association was a white male, and this is important for a reason. And he was being replaced by a white female. She won the election, which I guess must have happened before that. I don't really participate in this at all, so I don't know. He gets up and he makes a speech, and he says, I am a clerk on one of the appellate courts in Utah. I don't remember which one. He's like, all but one of our judges are now females. And he's like, our court will be perfect when we have 100% females on the court. Right now, it's just not perfect yet. And then he said, and our Supreme Court is now a majority female. And I look forward to the day when it is 100% female. And let me just add, I think the vast majority of, on the Supreme Court, on the Utah Supreme Court, all of the women are white women. Okay. On the appellate court, I think there might be a minority judge in there. So but most of them are white women. I just sat there, and it really kind of offended me, because I thought to myself, okay, if all we're gonna care about is identity, because he's not talking about any of these people's talent as judges. He said nothing about them in terms of, are they good lawyers? Are they good judges? Do they do a good job? Are the decisions quality decisions? Nothing. No comments. His only comment was about how they were women. And I don't think that qualifies you for anything except having babies. Obviously, only women can do that. So hats off to all the women out there. I know you're the only ones that can do that. So, and we thank you for it. I thank my mother for that. But for anything else, this is it's not a qualification for a job. It's definitely not a qualification for a judge, but that's all the guy talked about. And I found it offensive because I was like, if we're going to look at this, we don't have we don't have a lot of racial minorities on the courts in Utah. So like you as a white guy are totally happy to say, I don't want any opportunities for myself. And if let's say I'm just going to assume he's married to a white woman and they have white kids. And I don't think that my sons should be able to have a fair shot at these jobs. I'm willing to give that up. But you don't have the right to give it up for me. I'm a minority. And there's not a lot of minorities on these courts. So you don't have a right to go and say, we just need to fill all the courts up with women. And then you're excluding people like me from it. Or my nephews when they grow up. And let's say they want to be lawyers and they want to be judges. Like they should have that opportunity too. And so it really actually, I found it so offensive, just on a very gut level. And like I said, because my view is, I don't want to hear about all your non-qualifications for a position, like that you're a woman, that you're a man, that I'm gay. That is not a qualification for a job unless you want to date me. And then, like obviously you need to be a man. So but beyond that, it's totally irrelevant to anything. If in terms of my skill set as a lawyer, or as someone who tries to impact policy, it's just irrelevant. Or someone doing a radio show, not relevant, unless, again, you're looking to date me. And just so you know, it is true I am single, but I'm not good at keeping relationships. Just keep that in mind. I only say that because, a lot of times I get questions from people and they'll ask me for relationship advice. And I'm always like, okay, I guess I'm happy to tell you, give you advice, but just so you know, I'm single and I've had some long-term relationships, but obviously none of them have lasted. So just keep that in mind. And usually they still want to hear it. I don't fully understand it myself. It's a little bit weird, but whatever. Anyway, so back to the issue here. I think, Utah actually has the promotion of white women over everybody else is on steroids. And I don't know why it is. It's just, it's strange to me. And I think it's a cultural thing. I've actually talked to other people about it. And some people think that when white women run for office in Utah, that they have like a 5% advantage over non-white women. And I don't understand it. And maybe, I'd like to keep talking about it because if anyone has any thoughts on this, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Because I would like to be in a society where we're not looking at that. And we're actually just looking at the policies people push, their skills and their talent, and their capabilities and the type of impact they want to have on society. On the white women versus minority issue, it even impacts the Utah legislature and how they push diversity. I think on the Republican side, there are two minorities that I can think of in the two Republican minorities. Let me be clear about that. The Democrats hate men, so but they do have, in terms of the few legislators they have, I think most of them are women. The vast majority of them are women. They have a couple minorities in there though. So I think we have two racial minorities in our caucus. It's Doug Fiafia and then Anthony LeBay. And Anthony LeBay, I something you probably don't realize this, but I think he's actually half Mexican. So we've got two, but then they count all the white women as being minorities. And I don't think that that's actually an accurate reflection of, that's not really diversity. So, but having said all of that and tried to explain that to you, like my thinking on it, I do think that at the end of the day, if you want diversity, you should be looking for diversity of viewpoints. That's actually where you get your strongest. That's what you want in any organization, is a diversity of viewpoints. Because when people come at things from the different perspectives and you work it out, you'll end up with the best results. And that's what diversity should really be aimed at. and potentially you can come at that with diversity of backgrounds, not racial backgrounds, but growing up in different parts of the country, growing up in different types of families. It's things that have nothing to do with those innate qualities, but anyone can have the same thing. People of all races can come from the suburbs of Chicago like I did. People of all races can come from single family homes. People of all races can come from married homes, right? These are all commonalities that have nothing to do with your race, with your religion, with your ethnicity, with anything. And we should be focused on those things, because at the end of the day, I think the way that we benefit children and make sure that the future is going to be bright is we get back to the way America used to be, in my view, before Obama became president. And we focus on what's inside and not on your exterior, not on who you like to sleep with, and not on your mental health problems. We should avoid that one like big time. Okay, well, I have now talked for 2 hours, which means that we are done for today. I appreciate all of you guys who have listened. We will be back next week. Like I said, so thanks for listening to the Goud Crowd radio show. You should feel free to call in anytime when I'm talking. I love when we get calls. We'll be back again next week, and so will the weekly rundown. Like I said, the weekly rundown, I'm not going to be able to do it this week, but we will be back again next week. There's plenty of material out there, so we will find it and we will report it. So in the meantime, I will see you next time. Thanks.